Shania was kind of like a quiet storm. Also, praise and worship leader. She was that person who would go all the way in for her friends and family. I gave her back to him, who allowed me to be her mom, who allowed me to pour into her. And I was able to see like the fruits of my labor, because her labor was not in vain. So.
Welcome back to Legacy Talk 3 in episode 3. And I'm here today with our guest, Sharlene, who is here to share with you a very tender conversation. She's here to talk about how she navigated and hopefully, no, not hopefully, we know for sure help someone else to know what you do when you're navigating loss, when you're navigating grief and all of the emotions and all of the pain that can come with that. And she's going to share with us today about the loss of her 20-year-old daughter unexpectedly. And so, in this episode that's coming up, she wants to talk about and share with us what it's like with this kind of loss to navigate family, to navigate through faith, um, how it changed even her focus in life. And we know that her story is going to resonate and be a blessing and be a place of healing or the start of healing for someone today. So we want to definitely have the opportunity to encourage you and to give her the platform to bless someone's life, to continue her own healing process. And so we're going to jump right in to a conversation with Sharlene, and we're just challenging you to come on and lean in and listen today. Sharlene, thank you for coming and joining us today, and we're going to just delve right into it. We know it's a sensitive topic, and we know that this may not be the easiest part, of your faith walk of navigating this process, but we also know that your opportunity to share is going to be a game changer for someone today, as well as be another source of your healing. So as we begin the conversation, let's talk a little bit about your family dynamic, who you are, what you do as a career. If you want to share what you do in ministry, anything that can help us to understand what the navigation process was like for you and how things changed. So if we talk a little bit about you first as we go into the story, then we'll be able to relate even the more.
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm super excited to be here to be able to share my story, and I know that it's for sure a God moment. Even the way here, God continued to speak to me about that. So, who is Sharlene? So, Sharlene is an educator. I've been in the school system for 22 years. Sharlene has navigated her life through a divorce. And she's now happily married, going on 14 years. The daughter of, I have two siblings, so I'm the oldest of those siblings. In addition, just who I am as a person, like I'm a complete giver. I'm that person who's always there for whomever, however they need me. In church, I've been ministering for about 28 years. In addition to that, praise and worship leader. I was over the children's ministry there. Work with the youth as well, the young adults. There, I was an assistant pastor for about 8 years at my home church in Madison, Georgia. So I've kind of done a lot of things in regards to ministry, but I feel like ministry goes far beyond whatever we're doing. So with that, I feel like ministry is even a part of what I do every
Every
single
day,
day.
yes.
Yeah. So being an educator and now being an instructional leader, just being able to pour into others as they need. Whatever it is, because I feel like even my work assignment is actually an assignment from God. So,
Absolutely. As you were speaking, I began to uh, think about my children and with what my husband and I do in ministry. The very first thing that I said when we answered the call was, I'm willing to be who God has called me to be, but I'm not willing to do it at the detriment of my own family. That's first.
absolutely.
That's first. And I heard a minister say many years back, a powerful, prolific man of God say, I walk out of the church before I make my children feel as though they owe something regarding their mistakes or,
Absolutely.
the mishaps in life, that they owe something to the church because of what I do. I respected that because I feel that way. The same grace that's there for the people we work with or the people that we minister to, that same grace is there for our children and our family. So, absolutely, with what you said, because ministry first starts in your home. But as an educator myself for over 20 years, as I look, and scan the buildings and the schools that I work with, I always say that if people actually knew how much of a ministry teaching really is, then we could make more of an impact. But so many people
Absolutely.
look at it as a job. But there's a
Absolutely.
Charlene and there's a Joanna who knows that it's a ministry. So I completely concur with what you've said. Tell us as we move forward a little bit about your daughter, who she was. Tell us a little bit about her personality. I wish I had gotten an opportunity to meet her. I've seen pictures, but about her, about what made her special.
Well, Shania was kind of like a quiet storm. She was also praise and worship leader. Um, in addition to that, like she was a prayer warrior. She was that person who would go all the way in for her friends and family. She was very family oriented. She loved children. She would always come home with somebody else's baby and say, Mommy, I'm keeping them for the weekend. And I'm like, the weekend? Who's sending their child? But that was just what was in her heart. She was a complete giver. Um, and she was just very loving. She prior to her transition, she was a wife. She was a first lady. Yeah, as a youth pastor. And she worked with the children's ministry there as well. She was planning a women's conference even prior to her transition. So she was someone who truly loved God. So I'm just super elated that, God saw fit for me to be her mom and for me to be able to pour into her all that she needed for life.
For their
So,
journey.
yeah,
She definitely sounds like amazing young lady with the hand of God all over her. And as you were speaking earlier, and as you are sharing who she was, I began to think about the quote, and I'm misquoting it, but you all understand what I'm saying, that the greatest battles are given to the strongest soldiers.
absolutely.
And so when you think about her being a worship leader, a prayer warrior, we're raising up a generation of young people around me who are prayer warriors. Those are the ones that can change a nation. And so as you're speaking, I had no idea because we haven't discussed it. I'm hearing so much of this for the first time myself, that she wore so many hats at such a young age. But I'm also reminded, and I have to remember this with my own biological children, that we love them, but God loves them more. And we birth them, but they belong to Him.
Absolutely.
So, whatever impact He needed her to make while here on earth, I'm sure, as you're speaking, it was made. Uh, if you can, walk us through what happened with the loss and how that impacted your family? What was that season like for your family?
I would have to say that during that season was probably the worst season of my life. I can recall it was a Friday evening, and my phone just kept ringing. And when I finally answered the phone, her husband said that Shania is gone. And I immediately just kind of fell to the floor. I was wailing and I was like, this can't be true. Because I don't think I mentioned that, she took a leap of faith, prior to her getting married and moved to Ocala, Florida. So in the midst of this is 5 hours away from my home. So I just remember just screaming and hollering. And but the funny thing is, like, in the back of my head, I just believed that my daughter was going to be like the modern day Lazarus, because I had that kind of faith that, all that I had done for God, I just knew that once I was able to lay hands on her and to see her, that He would bring her back to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we ended up, I got dressed and I probably looked the craziest in my life because I don't think anything matched. But we drove the 5 hours there, and I remember specifically that there were like white doves flying as we were traveling to Ocala. And once we got there, of course, she had transitioned, and I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't understand why I would have to travel down this path. Um, but it was a crazy season. I'm just going to leave it there. I feel like
Yeah.
it was just a season that can no longer be described. I think it's like every parent's worst
Yeah,
nightmare,
absolutely.
to think that their child would no longer be.
Especially at that age. And I think you're absolutely right when we'll talk about faith next, when you have been that person of faith, when you have been obedient to the best of your ability. When you have a daughter, I can relate to that with the way my daughter lives, who you feel like have made every sacrifice she could for God and for
Absolutely.
righteousness and holiness. I can imagine, but as you were speaking, and until it hits your home, do you really understand the power in the scripture that reminds us that it rains on the just and the unjust?
Absolutely.
But without the struggle, we can't have the strength that we need to continue journeying as well. So, just, my favorite cliche or quote when I'm talking to, especially the believers, is we're not judged by what we've done, but more
Absolutely.
about what we've overcome.
Absolutely.
We overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. And I don't want to turn this into a preaching or teaching conversation, but you can't make it through something like this without the scripture. So, with that said, tell me how your loss impacted your faith.
Initially, I believe that there was a great impact because I think I went through all of the different stages of grief, because even the medical examiner, when she called, she said, I really, I, the little small blood clot that we saw, I really just don't see how that could have let her go into cardiac arrest. And I believe, like, in my mind, I just kept going over it, that was playing over and over in my mind, because then it almost led me to believe like it had to be like natural causes. And I was like, how could it be natural causes for a 22-year-old who had never had any health issues or anything like that? So I think for me, just trying to figure out how to move from here. The one thing that I did do was I stayed home for a few weeks, but I felt like I needed to get back into the house of God. Like I needed to hear the word to kind of give me strength and comfort during that time. But I was very strategic with that. So I would hear the word, but before service was over, I had to leave because I didn't want, anyone to come up and say anything, because I didn't feel like I was strong enough to, take in what they wanted to give to me at that time. But then also, it was like during that time, that was when God really spoke to me and was like, the way that you're going to make it through this is through praise and worship. And when he spoke that to me, I was like, that's crazy. Probably not going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But then my pastor was like, oh, I see Reverend Stroud in the house today. Can you come up and bless us? And I was like, man, this is wild. But the funny thing about that was, like, God gave me just enough strength to get up and to worship Him and to release what needed to be released in the house. But then when I went back to my seat, I was completely broken. Like, I was broken. I was like, God, like, how can I get up and bless the house when I'm broken? Like, literally broken. And that cycle kind of went on for a long period of time. And the one thing I can say is that I began to feel his strength. Um, I began to feel his nudging. And I decided that, yes, I was going to come in, I was going to get the word, I was going to, you know, um, give God all that I had through praise and worship, but I felt like I also needed more. So I did seek out to where I did go see a therapist. In addition, I went through Grief Share, which I would definitely highly recommend to anyone who's going through that journey, because although those people may not have lost a daughter, they've experienced loss, and it takes you through all of the questions that you have in your mind. So, just giving a shout out to Grief Share.
Well, for a moment, before we move on, then tell us what Grief Share is in case there's someone who needs to reach out to Grief Share.
Grief Share is a nationally recognized organization where churches can have a setup within their facility. So they have different sessions all over the world, technically. But I actually looked up and found one that was close to my home. And during that process, what Grief Share does is they give you like a book. You're like going through all of these different stages of grief, and you're able to talk about your particular situation, but it's a Christian based
Okay.
organization. Um, and then you're just able to really process what's going on. It's a 13-week program. And of course, at the end of that 13 week, you're able to bring in something that identifies you with your loss, and you're able to talk about that. But
Mm-hmm.
I would say, like, going through that program, probably the first couple, I just probably cried the entire time. But just doing the work helped me
Mm-hmm.
to facilitate what I was actually having to go through and to hear other stories. Because the one thing that I've realized is people really don't know what to say. And a lot of times when they say the wrong thing, then it's very hard for us as the grieving person, as, a mother, to kind of even look at them the same way. And I really had to talk to God to help me to even forgive some people for saying the wrong thing
Mm-hmm.
at the wrong time.
Mm-hmm. And I understand that it's people mean well. You know, I've dealt with infertility, and so many people around me have, and they mean well, but I think that comes from a place of ignorance. As you get older and grow in knowing who you are, you learn sometimes that silence, you know, a hug. And I can actually, as I said, you know, to the viewers, I'm hearing all of it for the first time because we met 6 years ago, right after the loss of your daughter. And with our mutual friend, we went out of town and had some girl time, which was, it was for her birthday, but of course you needed that. To this day, I don't even think I've ever mentioned her name to you or asked questions because in what I do every day, I know if it today is the day that God had for us to speak about it. But I also know that every time I saw you, I just want to wrap my arms around you. And I did. I have a daughter. You know, I have young people who I adore in my life, family, non-family. And so I can't imagine. So it does come from, for many, a place of ignorance. However, as you continue to navigate the journey and step out into the open doors that God will give you, you will be able to share with others, not necessarily in grief or dealing with loss, but how you help people. And sometimes it's just being there. Sometimes it may be a phone call, it may be a text. So a lot of times people don't learn until we have a Sharlene who has a platform to say, listen, this is how you know, if you're not a professional, you know, if you're not a part of that journey with them, sometimes unless they ask you for something, silence or just letting them know you're there is enough. So I think that the more we can educate through our experiences with something like this, the more we can, you know, I have another motto, each one reach one. You know, if you help one person, because we're all going to deal with loss, you know, on a regular basis, living this life, you know, we're all going to, but sometimes people just don't know what to say. So thank you even for sharing that. And I was getting ready to ask you about your faith being shaken and where you found strength again, but you've just stated that. And can I stop for a moment and say, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, from the time I met you and you have needed these years to go through a big part of your healing, there was always a light. Talk about grace carrying you. There was always a light. So I'm glad to know you and to sit back and watch because I don't know how God is going to use this, but so I'm not going to get teary eyed. But I know He is. I know He is. So tell me of the times that you feel like you saw God's unexpected hand in your situation as you went through the healing journey.
There were a few times that I actually saw God's hand throughout this journey. One being, my daughters and I love to go to like North Point Mall. That was like our space. We went there, we hung out for the entire day. And after the loss, I just went by myself because my other daughter was 5 hours the other way. And I remember my best friend calling me and she was like, "Where are you?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm at North Point Mall." And she was like, "You're up there alone?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm by myself, just needed a moment, to myself." So they ended up coming there. And she said, "Hey, let's go into Michael's. We needed to get something." So I said, "Okay." So literally, we're walking through Michael's. And I'm just walking aimlessly. And this lady comes up to me and she begins to minister to me in the middle of Michael's. And at that particular moment, what she was saying was in regards to what my daughter was saying to me. Um, that she really needed for me to be okay. And literally, the lady sounded just like my daughter. And she prayed for me and, gave me words of encouragement. And literally, again, we're in the middle of Michael's. And once she finished, I think I just kind of got ready to walk to the car. And we got to the car, then the lady never walked out of the store. So I knew that God had sent an angel to kind of carry me, to talk to me about um, how she wanted me to be able to move forward and that she was okay. And in addition, like, I believe, like, even God, like, gave me time to process because for an entire year, um, I would just love to go to sleep. Like, although I couldn't really sleep well, but I would just love to go to sleep because at that time, she was there.
Okay.
Like, I could see her.
Okay.
I could talk to her. I could feel her. Um, but I remember at the end of that year in my dream, um, she was just like in a white gown and literally she was like, "Mom, you're gonna be okay." And I just remember waking up like screaming, but that was the end of like God giving me that time to really process what was going on and the actual loss. Um, Even my pastor at the time, um, he was there with me through it all. Like, I don't know, how pastors are these days, but normally they don't have, time. But my pastor was there. He called me, he texted me, he was there. And the one thing that always stood out, he was like, no matter what you do, just represent the Father. So our coined word was like represent. So even, during a church service or if I would minister or whatever, he would always just text me and be like, represent. So I know that was truly the hand of God. And he didn't stop, you know, immediately. Like he's walked with me for years. And then my best friend, like I know that God sent her into my path for a reason because funny story, she was my sister's best friend. We just kind of knew. Thank you. We just kind of knew of each other. And um but she literally was there for me throughout the entire time, like, and she's never left. She's always prayed with me during those bad times and, encouraged me, like, you just got to keep going. So I appreciate that. And, just in thinking, because I feel like what I'm doing is going to help someone else. And what I realized was even during that time, like God sent another angel to me who had lost her daughter some years back. And she prayed with me and helped me to kind of navigate what that looks like. So even in the midst of your worst pain, like God is always sending a comforter. He's always sending someone there who can help you through your journey. So,
And that's what he promised in his word. I'm leaving, but I'll leave behind a comforter. I challenge anyone listening, and I know this, I can relate to the village, be it spiritual, because it's not always about church or being inside a church home, but I challenge everyone. If you have friends who are considered best friends or people who you um, are in relationship with on a regular basis, make sure you're connected to someone who can pray you through.
Absolutely. That's the key.
Period. And it's not always a pastor or a mom or a father. Make sure your village includes people who at your lowest times won't sink low with you, but know the power of prayer. That's paramount in this journey called life. So those were lots of examples about how God met you. And I know there's so many more, but he can't meet you if you don't know him or if you don't have other warriors around you that when you don't feel like fighting can fight on your behalf. So thank you for sharing that. Let me shift the conversation a little bit to you and your purpose because I said at the very beginning that you were going to share how it impacted the loss, impacted your faith, and how it impacted your family. Let's talk about how this shifted your focus and your purpose, how the loss shifted you with, as it pertains to your purpose.
I believe that the loss shifted a lot of things on the inside of me. Um, I knew that I was a powerful woman of God, but sometimes you feel like, oh, that's for somebody else. Not so much for me. Like, he can just use me when he wants to, and I'm good with that. But I feel like the loss, I had so much pain that didn't know where to go. And that's when I started Now Faith LLS. So within that, I was able to sow back into others who were going through really tough times and using prayer and the Word of God to kind of help us navigate through what that looks like. But what I have come to recognize is that God was birthing something in me. So I feel like when I first started the ministry, it was more so um, to make sure that Shania's name would never be forgotten. Um, but as I've navigated over the course of the years, it's what God wanted to use me for.
Anyway.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So,
Purpose being birthed from your pain.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking this morning, and like God told me a long time ago that I was going to write a book. And I started writing the book after the loss. But I feel like even having to come here today to talk about my story is kind of catapulting me into going ahead and just moving to do what God has called me to do. He gave me the title from Worrier to Worrier. And it just kind of navigates how you're going to make it through whatever you're going through. So I just believe that all things work together
Absolutely.
for the good.
I have a reminder in my phone that the Lord impressed upon my heart months ago this year, but in reminding myself of something so simple but so profound, and that is it was during worship time. You can't praise me and worry at the same time. And so every day that pops up on my phone. So even at the moment that I want to worry about something, I turn it into a praise. Okay, God, I thank you for the healing, or I thank you for the provision needed, or I thank you because you can't do both.
You have to be intentional.
Absolutely.
Because I can say after going through that loss, like I feel like I stayed in a perpetual wheel of something's going to happen. So because my other daughter was 5 hours away in North Carolina at school, like I was always worried about like something was going to happen to her or whatever. And I literally had to be intentional to put my faith over the fear, because the scripture that the ministry is founded on is now faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. So although I can't see it, I'm going to trust God. I'm going to believe him, and I'm going to put him before all things. So I completely concur with you that you do have to put praise.
Intentionality. Can you see through your loss? I know we're off script and it doesn't even matter. How easy it is if you don't know God or have faith to lean on to go into a dark place and stay there.
Absolutely. Without sharing too much, I want to say maybe like a year after my daughter transitioned, my first goddaughter was in a car accident and she transitioned as well. And my friend had watched my journey and literally just kind of mimicked everything that I did. But ultimately, she wasn't seeking God for herself. And I want to say it's been like 3 or 4 years, and she's still in a dark place because you have to look at your own situation and figure out how God can help you navigate through it. Because everyone's journey's not the same. And because it's not the same, God's not going to do the exact same thing for you.
Absolutely.
So I've actually seen it happen, and where people turn away from God as opposed to turning to Him.
Mhm.
Um, so I would just venture to say, continue to keep God first, because where He says He will never leave you nor forsake you, if you put your faith and your trust in Him, He won't leave you nor will He forsake you.
Mhm.
But I feel like if you don't put all of that hope and trust in Him, it does leave you down this dark hole
Mhm. That you
and
feel like you can't come out of.
that you can't come out of. And I feel like it's also like a spiritual battle, because when you go into that dark place, you're just welcoming all of these other things to come in. So you just have to be intentional. So I want to leave the
That word,
word
absolutely.
intentional.
And especially dealing with this generation that's growing up now, I tell them all of the time, your faith is all you have.
That's it.
When life has failed, when you've encountered loss, trauma, crises, health issues, betrayals, at the end of the day, your faith is all you have. Why am I saying that? Because time needs to be spent not in the things that aren't important,
Absolutely.
but in the things that are important, being intentional, uh, praying regularly, learning to be a prayer warrior for yourself. Not, you can't do it for others until you can do it for yourself. And it's those things, is hiding the word of God in your heart. It's those things that will build our faith.
Absolutely.
And so whoever I'm speaking with, sometimes speaking to, excuse me, sometimes we're spending much time on people and things that are so insignificant, when we need to be being intentional about putting more time and effort into the things and the principles that will help us to build faith. Because at the end of the day, your faith is all you have. It'll take you from barely surviving to thriving if we build our faith on the right foundation. So I'm going to stop for a moment and say to you two things. I want to ask a question, but I want to say, as you navigate, and again, I said to you earlier, I didn't want to turn this into preaching or a sermon, but and I don't know if God has already spoke to you, but as you were speaking, I heard you with represent, and I don't know where that's going to come out. I don't know if it's going to be a nonprofit, but pray about that, because that's supposed to be somewhere in your journey. Again, nonprofit, women's ministry, youth ministry, I don't know, but He's not finished with you with that represent. So be it confirmation or the opening of a door, write that down today. Tell the viewing audience something really quickly about Now Faith, because you mentioned it, but we didn't talk about it.
So Now Faith is an organization, again, that was birthed out of me losing my daughter. So it's Now Faith LLS, Long Live Shania, because I did want her name to continue to be spoken,
And her light.
and her light to continue to shine. because I feel like she did so many amazing things. And initially, it was for me to continue the work, but it ultimately is for the work that God had for me. So within that, we give back to the community. We feed the homeless. We have conferences. We partner with other ministries. We do love boxes, giving back to mothers ministries. Just doing small things to start, just to see how we can give back to other people. The ministry has been in effect for about 5, 6 years. Um, and it just started out like, hey, we're just going to give back to the community, and God is expanding it. We have a partnership with Bamba Socks. We give back to Title I schools who, have high poverty levels. So it's a ministry about giving back, but not just giving back material things, giving back ourselves, giving back hope, giving back to let you know that you can make it. So no matter what you're facing, no matter what you're going through, just know that you can make it through it.
And as of today, include a lady in her legacy with that. We're joining in as of today. As you were speaking, I just smiled because in everything that God has given me to do over the last couple of years, it deals with legacy. And legacy is not all about houses and cars and tangible assets, but legacy is about just what you're talking about, giving hope to those who are hopeless, giving faith to those who are faithless, whatever that is, security to someone who may have grown up without parents, food to the homeless. So it's not always just about tangible things, but I heard legacy in reverse. And I don't know if you've thought about that, but as you were speaking, it's our job to leave legacy for those who are following. Ruth gleaned behind Naomi, and Naomi was older, but then Ruth came along, and her story, even with the story that's out right now about her, is leaving a lasting legacy to women and to men. About how to find a wife, or about how to trust God even in the midst of loss. She dealt with loss. So even today, her story is still leaving a lasting legacy for especially women. But as we look at Boaz, he's left a legacy also for strong men who know what it means to find a wife, and take care of a wife. But usually when we think about legacy, we think about people our age and the people who are following, or our forefathers and grandparents and parents, or teachers, or whoever left legacies for us. So you always think about that, but I heard legacy in reverse, which is what I enjoy incorporating in what we do with legacy, is showing that legacy is about how your life is leaving an impact for those who are watching. So you did not actually tap into all of the gifts that God had for you until you had an unsurmountable amount of pain from loss. But what you're saying is because of who she was and the light that shined on her life, that you didn't want that light to go out. And in so doing, you have created a LLS that will go on for as long as you live, that will touch the lives of others. So you're leaving a legacy for those who are watching and listening, and beneficiaries of what you do. But then she left a legacy in your heart that is now burning a light and has put gasoline on it, and with every year it will grow stronger. So this is what we do. This is what it's all about when we say legacy matters. Legacy matters. It does matter. But today, in the days that we're sharing, we're talking about legacy matters. So I'm excited just about continuing to journey with you. And I was going to ask the question, what was a turning point? But I know that it seems like it was pretty much a year. You needed a year of healing. You needed a year of therapy. You needed a year of just uh, coming to grips that this is real. But it seems like at that year point, although today, you're still healing, it was the when I look at when the LLS started, when I look at what you were doing in ministry and how it began to birth strength in you, it seems like it was about after a year, the turning point. Okay, looking back, what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned through this journey?
My biggest lesson is to trust God no matter what, to trust Him beyond what I can see, beyond what I can feel, above what I can imagine, just trusting Him through the process. Um, I can't say that it's an easy road, but it's a road that you can conquer. It is a road that you can heal. Um, the Bible talks that we're more than overcomers, and I feel like you can overcome anything if you completely give it to God. So that would be the one thing I would say: trust God no matter what.
Has your view on eternity changed any?
More, the only way that I would say this is that my view is I just want to make sure I get there. And I've always wanted it, but when you have gone through such a substantial loss, you want to make sure you can see that person again. So my view is I want to do everything down here that God has commanded for me to do. So when I get to eternity, then I can shout heaven over, like, I'm glad I made it here. Um, and just doing things the way that God has commanded for us to do. Um, I don't believe that God takes anything before its time. I believe that all things happen within His time. And although we don't understand His timing sometimes, I'm reminded of when they do the rededication and they take your child and they say we're giving them
Giving
back to
back.
God who has given them to us. And I really had to take like a real true moment to even relish in that, because as parents we seem to think that our children are all ours, and we hold the time frame over everything that happens with them, because ultimately that's what we've done over time. But in regards to eternity, I gave her back to Him who allowed me to be her mom, who allowed me to pour into her. And I was able to see like the fruits of my labor, because
Mm-hmm.
her labor was not in
In vain.
vain. So
As you were just speaking about faith and trusting God, I began to think about those of us who are parents. And if the question is posed to you, would you be able to endure the process as Sharlene has if that was you? We have two things. We're the vehicle that God allows to bring the children to this world, but they belong ultimately to Him when we give them back. So as you were thinking, I said, if you knew that you were going to endure this, not you, I'm thinking about this, I'm reflecting, would you want to birth your child and have those years? Or would you not birth if you knew ahead of time? Because none of us know what the journey is going to look like. That's why faith is so important. And I said, hands down, I want to birth my children. And my prayer was always, God, allow me to live to raise them. And He's allowed that. That was the prayer. And so anything else, you know, I have to be ready for. And the one thing that I always think about when it comes to compassion is it's somebody else's story today, but it could be yours tomorrow. And that's the motto behind Legacy Matters and Legacy Talk 3 and is our story your future? It's the truth. So it's your story today, but someone will remember your story in their future. and need your story in their future. So, as we close and we talk about encouragement and we talk about advice, what would you say to someone listening right now who's navigating through pain of a loss of a child, of a loss of a very special relationship, or a loss of anything that is very, very heartfelt or important to them? What advice would you give? What will you say to them as they navigate? What are helpful things that you can say that will encourage them and give them hope while they're journeying? Just as we're closing, anything that you can share with someone who's navigating loss or grief of some kind.
I would say that it's okay.
Speak to them.
For the person who's going through loss or experiencing loss, I want to say to you today that you're going to make it. Not only are you going to make it, it's okay to take the journey. If you want to cry and scream and holler, but then continue to trust God through it all. I want to say to you that there is hope. Many times with loss, we lose hope, knowing that we don't believe that we're going to be able to make it. But if I can say anything to you right now, I want to speak it into your spirit that you're going to make it. And God is going to help you to make it through every step of your journey. So stay true to Him, stay connected to Him, and He will help you through it all. You got it.
Oh, that was powerful. I don't have anything else to add. I thank you, Sharlene, for your courage today because I know it wasn't easy. I thank you for your willingness to share with the listeners and to give that hope to someone. I don't have anything and I don't want to take away from what you have just left them with because I feel like that was enough said. But I want to say to the listening audience, thank you for tuning in to Legacy Talk 3 in once more. And I encourage you to keep holding on to hope. Don't let go of your faith. And always remember, you are not alone. See you next time.